like we have everybody, right?
We do.
Don't need
But
to.
Todd, I do expect that Chad's gonna call in tonight also.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I think.
Should I give the count to Todd or you, or? All right.
Good evening and welcome. Tonight is Monday, July 27th, 2020. It is 7:00 p.m. This is the regular city council meeting for the city of St. Peter. We are having a in-person meeting and a virtual meeting. Instead of taking roll, the in-person councilors that are here are council members Kerry Johnson and Ed Johnson and myself, Mayor Zeman, and the people that are with us virtually would be the balance. That we would all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone should have a copy of the agenda in front of them. Are there any changes, corrections to the agenda? If no one wants to make a change, I am going to make a change, suggested change. We will vote on it to strike under new business the mandatory face covering policy. I believe with everything that has been done by the governor, I'm not sure we need to rehash this. But that doesn't mean we can't. So, with that change, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I will make a motion to approve the agenda with your change, Mr. Mayor.
All right, is there a second?
Kerry Johnson will second.
Okay, all in favor of the agenda with the change of striking under new business mandatory face covering policy, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved with that change. Next, we have the minutes from our July 13th, 2020 meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 6 through 9. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Noel moves.
Proof that will second.
All right. All in favor of the minutes of their July 13th meeting, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Oops. Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next, we have a public hearing. And tonight, we have, the public hearing is on the Wellhead Protection Plan Amendment Number 2. And we will go about some background rules and procedures here in a second, but before that, I'm officially going to open the public hearing concerning the Wellhead Protection Plan on Monday, July 27, 2020 at 7:04 p.m. And Todd, would you like to go over some procedures?
Mayor, members, generally public hearings are held in the manner in which there's a presentation done by staff or consultants, and that will be the case tonight. There's an opportunity provided for public input. With this agenda item, it was noticed in advance and a part of the regulations requiring it. There's an opportunity to comment in other ways other than just at this meeting, but there is opportunity for public to comment tonight. We ask that the public keep their comments to 5 minutes or less. This item has action tonight. Not all hearing items have action tonight, but this one has a planned action tonight, Mr. Mayor. So that's kind of the brief of the rules.
Okay. With that,
Mr.
Pete, is this you or is this
Yeah,
Todd?
let's start with Newt tonight, or
With
Pete.
Newt, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so Jeff Knutson, and Jeff, if you don't mind, I know you're on there, but I'm going to put up the graphic here right away, and then you just let me know when you've seen enough.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Jeff Knutson with the Water Resource Superintendent out at Public Works. What we've done here in the last 18 months, we've worked on updating and amending our water or wellhead protection plan, which we had in 2010, which is our original one. It's one of those that we do every 10 years that the city be required in coordination with the Department of Health and Minnesota Rural Water, as we have two guest representatives from those agencies here tonight with us. We amended it here, and part of it is to get the approval from the council and kind of give you a little Reader's Digest version of what the wellhead protection plan is. It's a two-part plan that the engineering firm that we hired about 18 months ago, Stantec Engineering, and Mark Janovic is the engineer that put together this, along with the city staff, Chris Volz and myself. But it's a two-part plan. Part one basically consists of identifying our DWSMA, and the acronym for DWSMA is Drinking Water Supply Area. As you see on the map, that in the black there kind of outlines our DWSMA there. That basically is an area that has impact on our wells. We have 9 wells that we have for our community supply. Up at the Broadway Water Tower, we have wells 11 through 14. And down at the St. Julian Water Plant, we have wells 6 through 10. And the two parts that in there, the first part, we basically identify that, and we identify all the potential contaminant sources at the surface, other wells, feedlots, any kind of other hazardous material that might affect our groundwater. And Mark and his engineering staff have identified that, and he also puts together some information as far as time travel when that water moves through the ground towards our well areas. Part two is a part of the program where we implement the kind of more the educational part. We work with the people in that DWSMA, a lot of the agricultural that we associate just west of St. Peter. And we kind of educate them, and we'll have some educational courses coming up here as part of our follow-up on that plan. One of the things that we did here recently, we also identified local government units, a lot of the county board, a lot of the Nicollet County staff and the nurses, health and environmental studies, the commissioners that are in that wellhead protection area, the DWSMA, they also got notified here. We've been working with Mark from Stantec Engineering as part of this amended plan. Stantec also did our original one in 2010, so they're quite familiar with what we had to do and what we needed to get done in the amended for this plat. Mark also helped us get a $10,000 grant through the Department of Health that'll not pay for all of this, but it'll pay for a good portion of it. And once we get everything approved and move forward, we'll ask for that grant to be part of the funding for that program. That's kind of a Reader's Digest. I've got Mark and Scott Anson available if you got some technical questions.
All right. What we will do is we will go through this process of the public hearing, and then when this item comes up, it'll be the first thing on our new business now. Then we'll ask for their input if they have anything at that time, and then the council can ask questions. But now I will go to the applicant's presentation, which is basically the same, what we've just done. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on this matter at all? If not, like I said, we can ask all the questions we want here in just a few minutes, but we'll move this along. We will therefore, if there's no other comments, we will therefore close this public hearing for the Wellhead Protection Plan Amendment 2 at 7:09 p.m. on Monday, July 27th, 2020. Next up, we have visitors. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any agenda item? I know, Montana, you're here. We're going to reserve the fact that I know the item you're here for, so if we need to talk to you, then we will do that. And if we don't, that's fine too. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the council on any agenda item? Is there anyone that would like to speak to the council on any matter whatsoever? Seeing no one, we will go to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 11 and concludes with the resolution on page 29 and includes the following employee appointments: to Brenda McHugh for library supervisor at $23.80 an hour, to Dean Heimerman for part-time meter reader for $15.02 an hour, plus the regular schedule of disbursements for July 9th, 2020 through July 22nd, 2020. Are there any comments, questions concerning the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve?
This is Steve Grams. I move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Bruflat will second.
Steve 1, Emily 2. Any questions now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. Next, we have unfinished business, and Russ is here for the revolving loan request for Gensel Holding LLC. Russ?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, this originally was on your agenda and you discussed the matter on the 13th of this month. It was specifically noted that the recommendation regarding the amortization of the loan was a specific variation from the guidelines that had been adopted regulating the revolving loan fund. It was also noted at that time by members of the council and the mayor that it was noted that Mr. Gensel was not providing a 10% contribution towards the project, again, as recommended in the guidelines that you have adopted regulating the revolving loan. I brought the matter back to the EDA. They discussed the matter at their meeting last Thursday. I won't go through my full presentation from the 13th, but I would refer the mayor and members to the table that's on page 31, what we would refer to as the source and use. The SBA 504 program has really become in vogue. In my 19 year career here, we have not done a 504 SBA program, but it's become very attractive in that between the bank and SBA, they can do 90% of the loan. So in both instances, in the Gensel Holdings and in the loan you'll be hearing later tonight, it both uses the SBA 504 program and both suggest 90% SBA and bank financing. You'll notice on page 31, it was reported at the last meeting that Mr. Gensel had prepaid and would pay some additional modest expenses towards the project. We were asked to quantify those. They show up now in an amended source and use on page 31. Mr. Gensel had put $2,500 down towards the $99,900 purchase price, and now that money will stay in the program. Mr. Gensel had to pay a $1,500 fee to Anytime Fitness as they considered his relocation and reviewed his plans. A development agreement that was presented to you at workshop last week and that you'd be asked to approve tonight would indicate Mr. Gensel would have $3,000 in legal and engineering expenses that he would reimburse the city, and then also he would pay the real total cost of the inspection of the installation of the public improvements, which has been conservatively estimated to be $3,000. Finally, Mr. Gensel would have a 1% origination fee associated with this particular loan program. So it has been identified that he would have $10,750 and recognize that that is only 1.4%. The EDA then specifically acknowledged that Mr. Gensel would not be providing 10%. They once again specifically acknowledged that this would be a straight 20-year amortization. One of the reasons for the lack of cash is that all the business advice that I've heard and that businesses have received is to maintain your cash reserves. And so that is one of the reasons that Mr. Gensel is requesting such a low participation. The other is that according to the accountant employed to review the Anytime Fitness, there were a considerable amount of profits that were not realized as Mr. Gensel closed the business by order from about mid-March until, through June. Again, the EDA then has recommended that you approve the loan at an amended amount of $75,000 as opposed to $77,500. Again, it would be at a 3.25% interest rate, which is the U.S. prime. Would have a 20-year straight amortization, although it would be reviewed every 5 years for potential interest rate adjustment and then allow us an opportunity to review the finances of the business. It would be personally guaranteed by Chad and his wife Kirsten Gensel. Would provide a subordinate mortgage to mortgages held by Hometown Bank and SBA 504, and it would be immediately due and payable if Mr. Gensel were to close or relocate Anytime Fitness. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'd ask any questions you may have.
All right. Questions from anyone? For Russ? Steve?
Russ, with that small business loan, does that negate the possibility that Mr. Getzel could pay it off early? Or not?
I would believe that he would probably have that right, Steve. I'm not exactly sure. The benefit to Mr. Gensel is that 40% of his financing is going to be locked in at an interest rate for a full 20 years. The bank is going to review theirs on a 5-year basis, just as the recommendation is for the EDA. But the main benefit is that he's guaranteed the rate that the SBA is providing for day one for the full term. A lot of loans, Stefan, are refinanced or businesses are sold and the financing is changed all the time. So it very well may not be a full 20 years, but we are committing to a 20-year period.
All right, thanks, Russ. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions? Carrie?
Hi, Russ. What criteria is the EDA using when it's discussing just the general issue or topic of approving or moving forward, an applicant's request despite the financial contribution of the applicant being below the suggested 10%? Because I noticed that this will come up in the next request on our agenda as well. I'm just wondering what type of criteria the EDA is using, and is it something that the EDA may consider establishing some kind of criteria just so that this is applied equitably in the future?
Yeah, Ms. Johnson, that's one of the reasons that the policy was adopted, but the EDA and I think previous councils appreciated that they do have some flexibility within the guidelines. These are your guidelines. These are not rules of the Department of Employment and Economic Development or the Department of Housing and Urban Development. These were adopted by the previous city council. We have varied from that in the past, and we've always tried to specifically make a notation that it's variance from the written policy. The policy was revised in 2016. Prior to that, we would often say that the city could do a maximum of 40%, and then between the applicant and the lender, they had to do the balance of the other 60. Oftentimes that worked out 10% financing from the applicant, 50 from the bank. We finally put those down in writing, again, trying to be more consistent, but also trying to maintain some flexibility. I think one of the reasons the 504 is more popular is due to COVID, actually, and the fact that the applicant's only being required to bring in 10% from their pocket or out other sources, and having 90% from the SBA and the bank. So they specifically did write in that you could vary from the interest rate from time to time for particular matters, and that you could also then vary from other guidelines that you've adopted or previous councils adopted. Don't know if that specifically answers your question.
Yeah, so my question is really around what did the EDA consider in these situations to warrant a variance? And it sounds like COVID-19 was a consideration. Were there other considerations? And maybe Councilmember Johnson or DeVos would like to chime in, but I'm just curious about that discussion.
I can.
Ed, go ahead.
Well, one thing we did consider is the gentleman that has this business now has to move. The facility is getting purchased by another company, so he has to build another place to put his, and that he wants to hold on to some of his cash and stuff like that. That's why he wanted to use less of his cash, but we felt that, he's kind of getting booted out. He has to do something, so.
Thank you.
Brad, did you have anything to add?
I was just gonna say the same thing as Ed did, so that's all.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for us? Russ, I have a question. If he would have had 10%, would that have affected his ability to get the SBA loan?
No, SBA and the bank aren't particularly concerned where the 10% comes. It's
Okay.
between the two of them, they can do a maximum of 90.
Okay.
So, yeah, they're both well aware of how the loan is structured here and our participation and both the applicant's contribution.
In the future, I would like to see the EDA take it, at least discuss it, instead of, well, not instead of, but in, also, a 10%, but also maybe a minimum dollar amount. You know, if we're talking 750,000 and 10%, $75,000, well, you know, they're coming to us probably for a reason. But maybe there's some kind of a minimum requirement that's needed in this situation. But if the EDA could, you know, there's a lot of smarter people than myself on there, but maybe they want to take a look at that, an either or type situation. Just a suggestion. Anyone else have any other questions? If not, the resolution approving a $75,000 revolving loan to Gensel Holdings LLC to partially finance the construction of a new commercial structure for Anytime Fitness appears on pages 34 and 35. Is there a motion for approval?
Ed will make a motion to
Devos.
approve.
Okay, Ed 1, Brad 2. Any other questions?
Sure.
Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye. Resolution is approved. Next up, we have new business, and we struck item A, so we'll move to item B, which is the Wellhead Protection Plan update. And we're going to go back to Newt and your two cohorts, if they want to say anything.
Mark, do you have any comments or input that you'd like to share with us about the time you and your staff put together over this over the 18 months?
Yeah, hi, good evening, Mayor and council members. Jeff did a really good job of summarizing the plan, so I don't really have a whole lot to add to it.
Mark?
Basically,
Mark?
this is,
Could you,
Yes?
Could you give us your name and just who you work for?
oh, yes. I'm Mark Janovic, I'm with Stantec Consulting Services.
Okay, thank you.
As I was saying, Jeff did a really good job of summarizing the plan earlier for the public hearing. Basically, this is an amendment that's required every 10 years, so you're through I think this is your second amendment process. The main thing to look for this Part 2 Wellhead Protection Plan is to identify potential contamination sources within that mapped area, that map that was shown earlier. We found 43 other wells in that area, 9 storage tank sites, 87 septic systems, 2 animal feedlots, 15 hazardous waste generators, and we also located 10 spill or leak sites, of which 9 of those are no longer active and 1 of them is still under active investigation. The plan basically has four main goals, and that's to provide high-quality water that meets state and federal drinking water standards, which the city is already doing. The second is to implement best management practices for those potential contamination sources, just to make sure that they don't become a problem in the future. The third is to work cooperatively with local units of government on regional aquifer protection issues. And the fourth is to build awareness of wellhead protection within the community. So the actual implementation plan includes 17 overall objectives. They fall under several different categories. The main ones are identifying and seal unused wells. The reason we want to seal unused wells is because they're a direct conduit for contamination to go from the surface down to the aquifer. So any unused wells that aren't sealed must be sealed according already to the state's well code. This just reinforces it. And actually, by having this in the wellhead protection plan, it also opens up grant money to help seal those wells. So it's actually a pretty good program there. The second is to work on public education efforts, try to target the public on household hazardous waste, lawn fertilization, septic systems, and also try to educate property owners on storage tanks, feedlots, and agricultural tillage so they can all do their best management practices to help protect the aquifer. The next is to develop spill response measures to protect the aquifer once a spill does occur. And then the last thing is to collect data on potential contamination sources to identify for future risks to the aquifer or any additional changes that occur within this area. So the next step of the process is to submit this plan to the Department of Health. There's a 90-day review and approval process. And then once the plan is approved, the plan will have a 10-year lifespan. And as I said, once you do have an approved plan, you then are eligible for grant money. So you can get a $10,000 grant. You can actually get multiple grants. You can only have one at a time, but the city's already had one grant so far. So this opens you up for future grants, such as if you needed to seal wells, you could apply for a $10,000 grant to seal wells for that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Scott, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, thanks. I'm Scott Hansen with Minnesota Rural Water Association, and like I said at the start, I'm taking over for Karen Voss with the Minnesota Department of Health. She was the assigned technical assistant person to the city, and she recently retired, so that's why I've been being brought on board here. So I will help you through a few steps here at the end as far as the paperwork to get everything in order, and once the plan is in place here, work with yourselves and Mark as far as the implementation of the plan goes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I have a question. Mark, you told us some numbers at the beginning. Were those numbers, if you have it, were those numbers in line, or were they what you thought they should be, or was there some violations or other things that kind of surprised you?
No, there was really no surprises. The plan area didn't change significantly from the last time we did the plan in 2010. So we kind of already had a pretty good idea what was out there, and this was just kind of revising that inventory to make sure that we knew what's currently out there. Some of the wells and septic systems that had been previously in that area were removed, and some things may have been added in the meantime, but really there was no significant changes that we saw.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Mayor and members, if I can, I'll just mention that a link to this for our website is available for folks that want to see it and into the future. And it's a 200-plus page document with lots of great maps and all kinds of stuff. So it really does do a great job of talking about what your plan is for your wells and that area. And so we'd encourage folks to take a look on your website if they have the opportunity.
Okay. Steve, you had a question.
Yes, I just was wondering, how do you go about, being that this is the second, I'm assuming it's the second year you've done other ones in the past for St. Peter, but how do you go about initially identifying unused wells that are personal individuals within this mapping area that Mr. Knutson was referencing?
Well, one thing you can do is you can do a survey of properties. So now that the plan is in place, we could send out a mailed survey to any properties we suspect may have a well at their home, and say, if you have a well and it's no longer in use, make them aware that the state well code does require that they seal it, and that there is grant money available from the state to help seal that well. So it's actually a good thing for them to respond, because in the past, without the grant money, nobody ever wanted to respond. But now with this grant money that they could pay potentially to seal, for all the costs to seal the well, it's a good thing for them to respond and stay up to speed with the well code. So.
And how do we as a city, and how do you identify or are certain that all the wells that people would have had in St. Peter before there was a municipal water system, that those are capped or closed?
Well, there's really honestly no way of knowing that. We basically go by what the state has in their inventory, but they really only started keeping records about the mid-1970s. So we have to kind of build this database as we go along by working with the homeowners and property owners to see what else may be out there that we don't currently know about. So we're probably never going to have 100% understanding of what's out there, but the more we work through this process, the more we can build that inventory and identify which wells need to be sealed. So it's not a perfect process, but it's the best we can do for now.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Grams, we do have a pretty good idea about the wells in the city limits, because this is actually our fourth wellhead protection plan. We started in 1990, updated it informally with Bolton and Mink in 2000, Then we brought Mark along in 2010, and he helped us develop this format that we're in now, and this is his second time around. But we did a door-to-door survey where we looked at lead lines, sump pumps, private wells over the course of the last 20 years, and we've had that on our master file, pulling information from that and then working to seal private wells.
Well, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm accused of not having a life. I read the entire report, but then when I started reading all the chemical analysis, I kind of fell asleep, so I quit. So I still do need a life.
Yes.
All right, any other questions? Shannon?
This is Scout Water. I was just going to add another way you can find those wells is that if property changes hands, you're required to disclose the location and status of wells that are on the property. So you can look through that process too, and sometimes through the sales history, you can become familiar with some of those wells, especially the older ones, if there's some sand points or something down the basement that, pre-well code that you wouldn't be aware of otherwise.
All right, Shannon?
Now, I'm not as great a reader as Steve, so maybe this was in the report, but I'm wondering, are there any agricultural pesticide containment systems within our area? And do we collaborate with the state in terms of monitoring those, or what kind of reports would be made to us if there was a leak in one of those systems?
We didn't identify any in the databases we looked at. There could be some out there, but we're not aware of any. Obviously, if we do find them, we should then add them to the wellhead protection plan and have some sort of measure in place. There should be some sort of spill or leak response measures in place too. So even if something we don't know about today does happen to spill or leak, that there would be some measures taken to clean it up.
Thank you.
Carrie?
Yes. So to read this plan, it was an education. It was really interesting, and just appreciate our drinking water being protected through this system, this process. I was really interested in the education and outreach efforts, and I saw in the local report that was embedded in this plan, so maybe this is more of a question for Jeff, that we even work with our local lawn care companies to talk through just some education about runoff challenges, stormwater challenges. Can you talk about some successes and, I guess, challenges to some of your education and outreach efforts locally and maybe even with the county?
We've kind of focused more on the residential more than we did some work with the Cal Association as far as getting out there, and in one of our storm basin areas there where we did a lot of door knockers were put on doors, kind of just showing the cause and effect of lawn fertilizing and over fertilizing. Our education right now, but I know we have some more here in the part 2 in our plan that Mark put together for us, so we'll be working with that.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, do you expect any big challenges with that, with trying to get out there and educate the public, but also educate some of the companies and kind of, like you said, the cause and effect? Do you see people being receptive to that information, or is it sometimes just hard to reach people?
Absolutely. I think we're in that age and environment now. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? The resolution adopting the updated wellhead protection plan appears on page 59. Is there a motion for approval?
Noel will move.
Ed will second.
Noel 1, Ed Johnson 2. Any other questions? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
All right.
Councilmember Bruflat. Aye. Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate all your work. Next up, we have the Clark Street Sanitation Improvement Project, and we have Mr. Domras here, and we have Mr. Moulton here. Anybody else that we need to hear from? But go ahead, Pete.
Mayor Zeman and City Council, as you're aware, at the last council meeting, you took action to sell some property identified as Outlot D in the Traverse Green subdivision, 12.8 acres, to an interested party. Part of what we need to do to make that development work is to get sanitary sewer to that facility. What we have done then is asked Bolton and Mink Engineering to provide a proposal to make that happen. You can see the itemized cost that would go into that, along with the timeline that's on pages 60 and 61. Jeff Domras also has a memorandum that talks about how we would make things happen and what the initial plan is. That would be a deep sewer that extends from Clark Street all the way past County Road 20. Then we'd be working with a developer to supply service to that area. There is a resolution on page 64, and I'm available for questions.
Anyone have questions for Pete or Jeff? Carrie?
Yes, hi Pete. The land that you would need to access to do this project, I haven't had a chance to drive by there in a while, but did they use that property for farming?
One of them is farmed, and one of them is idled acres or CRP. And so we have talked to both those property owners. They have given us permission to access it to do some survey work. We still have negotiations to do to complete an easement to get the spruce there, but the initial steps are underway.
Okay, thank you. Where I was going with that is I was looking at the timeline and just interested in what that property is being used for. Thank you.
Any,
Right, yeah, it's currently agriculture.
any other questions? Steve?
Pete, when you bore this hole, how deep do you go? And should a property owner, other than a personal opinion, have any concerns about boring the hole underneath their property?
The only areas that we would have to bore, Stephen, is underneath County Road 20. We would open cut the land from the end of Clark Street all the way over to County Road 20. We'd take the topsoil off, push it back, dig the sewer line in, and then cover it up. And when we get over to County Road 20, we would directional bore from one of the two directions so we know what the grade is.
How deep would you have this, the pipe that you're installing?
I think at the deepest part, it's about 20 feet.
Okay. All right.
It'll serve quite an area to the west yet.
All right. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions? The resolution authorizing preliminary engineering services for Clark Street Sanitary Sewer Extension Improvement Project appears on page 64. Is there a motion for approval?
This Steve Grams, move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Carrie Johnson will second.
Steve 1, Carrie 2. Any other questions at this time? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have the Anytime Fitness Development Agreement. Russ?
Mayor, members of the City Council, this is also an agreement with Gensel Holding LLCs. This is for the development of the project that will be financed with the loan that you'd previously approved. We talked about this at your last workshop, so I'll give you the rundown. We have a development agreement when we're going to undertake public improvements within the private property. This is for the construction of a new Anytime Fitness franchise at the northwest corner of Dodd Avenue and Minnesota Avenue. The property at this time is undeveloped, and again, the agreement presented to you addresses the unique circumstances of that particular property and the installation of the public improvements. As we explained last Monday, much of the language within the agreement is common to dozens of other agreements that we've entered into during my tenure here. The agreement has been reviewed by Public Works Director Moulton, City Administrator Prafke, and myself. And then we had help putting that together with Jeff Knutson and Jeff Domers from Bolton Mank. In the agreement, specific then to the development of Lot 1, Block 5 of Orchard Ridge, the developer acknowledges that he will have a future stormwater assessment when the city is able to site, design, and construct a regional stormwater basin. His share of that assessment will be based on a prorated share of his property compared to the entire drainage area. Until such time, there will be a small temporary basin that would be installed on the site. Upon the development of the regional basis, it's likely that that would then be discontinued. The agreement requires that Gensel Holding install the curb and gutter along Old Minnesota Avenue with the 2020 improvements. The sidewalk along Dodd Avenue, then we will be applying for a local partnership program grant from MnDOT that if we're successful, that will pay 100% of the installation of the sidewalk along Dodd. If we are unsuccessful in that endeavor, we intend to ask MnDOT to include the sidewalk and other improvements within their 2024 plans for the improvement of Highway 22. If we're unsuccessfully in that manner, the sidewalk will be installed, and then Mr. Gensel will be assessed as per the city policy that would exist at that time. The developer is obligated, as I said earlier in the meeting, to reimburse the city $3,000 for legal and engineering services. The developer then will pay the actual cost of the city's inspection of the installation of the public improvements, and that's been conservatively estimated to cost $3,000. The agreement would require that all the public improvements be concluded by November 15th, and upon your acceptance, they would become public property. The agreement begins on page 67, and I didn't write down where it ends, but I'm guessing page 91, since there's a resolution on page 92. The resolution does acknowledge that there are likely to be some very, very small engineering details that will be amended from what's on the plan now. I would expect that they would be of a manner that I couldn't explain or identify. So I would hope that you would approve the agreement with notice that there will be some minor engineering details and that those would have to be accomplished to the satisfaction of your city administrator and public works director. The text of the agreement will not be altered, and Mr. Gensel has already consented to the agreement and its terms and has provided a signed copy, as is the city policy, before your consideration this evening. Again, I'd answer any questions that you may have, Mr. Mayor, or members of the City Council.
All right. Questions for Russ? I know we went over this last week and, well, I guess we had time in a week here to read over the details. Mr. Gensel has joined us. Chad, timeline? When are you going to be open in this new facility? All right.
I might not be letting him in, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Just a second. Go.
That's all right.
Okay, now we can talk.
Chad, did you hear my question? What's your timeline on this as far as getting started and completion? Do you have one yet?
Well, as soon as we get that last permit we're working on right now for that stormwater basin, we're ready to start construction because I got to be out of my building by November 1st.
Oh, you do? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as soon as possible.
All right. Any other questions for Chad? Steve?
It's
Or
really
Russ,
not
too.
a question, Mr. Mayor, but I just wanted to thank Mr. Gensel for really improving that north end of town. It really will be a positive addition. And maybe you and I, Mr. Mayor, could get our memberships and you could push me over there and be the two of us who could really build up our pipes.
Well, we could do that, Steve. I could push you over. Is there a cliff along the way? Anyway, Chad, I want to reiterate kind of what Steve says, but I think I want to go to the fact there for, thanks for being a good business resident for St. Peter, and thanks for believing that it still remains one, and doing a lot of effort here on your behalf to get this done. Any other questions? If not, the resolution authorizing execution of development agreement with Gensel Holdings LLC for construction of a new Anytime Fitness facility appears on page 92. Is there a motion for approval?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
Emily will second.
Ed 1, Emily 2. Any more questions now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. And Chad, I don't think you were here for the earlier one, but I think you figured out that we approved your loan, revolving loan request too. So, just in case.
I was on the phone. I heard. I'm not very good at technology, so it took me a little bit. This is my first go-to meeting, so.
All right. Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Russ.
Thank you, guys.
Yep. Next up, we have a land exchange for 925 Austin Drive. And
Mr.
Pete, I think, right? No?
This one is Russ.
This one's Russ, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, after you approved the registered land survey for the bidders that split the land, I went to my weekly meeting with the city administrator, and we recognized that we didn't provide for the land transfer. We teed it up, but we never got it on its way to the green. So I guess it would probably be best just to refer you to page 97, which shows the map. And it has been the intent that the city would obtain the green parcel in a quitclaim from the bidders. The bidders then would obtain the red outlined parcel from the city in a quitclaim. The city attorneys prepared the two quitclaims that are, I believe they're in your packet. And we need your approval to authorize yourselves, Mr. Mayor, and the city administrator to execute those on behalf of the city. The bidders have paid the engineering, they paid the legal fees for the cost of the quitclaims, they will pay the deed tax, and they will also be paying the recording fees as we move forward. I answer any questions you may have.
Questions for us? If not, the resolution authorizing execution of the quitclaim deeds to facilitate transfer of land between the city and Craig and Julie Bitter appears on page 98. Is there a motion for approval?
Carrie Johnson will
Noel
make a
will-
motion to approve.
All right.
Noel will second.
All right. Carrie 1 and Shannon 2. Any questions at this time? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have the YCDHT LLC revolving loan request. And Russ again.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, YCDHT LLC. That is an LLC wholly controlled by Christine Montana Rasmussen. I will refer to her as Montana or Ms. Rasmussen instead of YCDHT. I think I couldn't spit that out fast enough. But the EDA has recommended that you provide a revolving loan to assist Montana as she would seek to purchase the real estate that she's currently leasing. In 2016, Montana bought the kitchen and bakery assets and business from River Rock Coffee Shop. And at that time, she relocated the business to 219 Park Row, a building owned by the St. Peter Development Corporation. And I'd just like to take a moment and thank them publicly for the investment that they made into the two properties, because I think everybody is aware that those were likely the next demolition by neglect. So the Development Corp purchased those, spent considerable funds, to bring them up to very current standards. And I'm glad to say that all of the 3 apartments and the 2 commercial spaces are all subject to existing leases. So very prudent investment, and they should be publicly thanked in my view. In 2016, when Montana purchased those assets, she received a $40,000 loan from the EDA. All of the payments that have been made as due, when due, and in the amount due. It is under right now the deferment that you granted for COVID, and the payments are expected to resume here on August 1. That note is secured by a promissory note, a security agreement, or UCC filing, a mortgage that was recorded against Montana's private residence, given that she was entering lease space, a personal guarantee executed by Montana and her spouse, and then identifying Montana as a key personnel in this matter. We do have a life insurance policy, or she does have a life insurance policy that is lists the city as an assignee on that. In April of this year, then, Montana received a COVID-19 microloan, $10,000, and repayment of those notes are deferred until 2021, June of 2021. Montana is proposing, as I mentioned earlier, to purchase the 217 and 219 Park Road properties. They've been assembled as a single sales parcel. They share a doorway in the basement, and Development Corp considered severing them and selling them individually, but they've been offered as a package. So the total purchase price has been proposed at $420,000. Again, an SBA program. SBA in this case has identified potentially $10,000 in fees for a total of $430,000. As I mentioned when you were considering the Gensel Holdings, it is proposed that First National Bank and the SBA then provide 90% of the project financing. The EDA has recommended that you accept a $5,000 or 5% contribution, or $21,500 contribution from Montana, and also a matching 5% or $21,500 loan from the EDA. Again, the EDA did acknowledge specifically that Montana wasn't planning or proposed to put in 10%. And again, Montana's bakery business has been negatively impacted by COVID. Some of the retail establishments are there, but the food service, certainly the wineries, et cetera, a large base of her customer weren't in business for about 4-some months. So the business has had some cash flow challenges, but Montana is willing to make an investment and express her confidence in a return to a better economy. But also recognizes that the recovery is to be slow. So she, again, would like to maintain as much of the cash on hand as possible to see how this recovery pans out fully. The SBA in this case and the bank have structured this on a straight 25-year amortization. And so again, as one of the borrowers, the expectation or the requirement from SBA 504 would be that you match that 25-year straight amortization. Again, it's proposed that you have a 5-year review each 5 years to undertake a review of the loan, to review Montana's finances, and to perhaps adjust the interest rate if it's deemed appropriate and prudent. Again, the EDA then did specifically acknowledge that this would exceed 20-year amortization and the proposed 5-year balloon that's identified in your guidelines. The building has an appraisal of $435,000 as of March 2020. The notes mortgages could be recorded in conformance with the policy, as the mortgages recorded would add up to 94% of the appraised value. Again, the property has 2 ground floor commercial spaces. One is River Rock Bakery and Kitchen. The other is Park Road Nutrition. Then there are 2 apartments above 219 and a single apartment above 217, and those are all fully leased at this point. The EDA then did review the cash flow of the real estate. Corey Abels, pardon me. Corey Abels from the EDA and I then reviewed the finances of River Rock Bakery and Kitchen, as well as those of the Rasmussen household. We identified no irregularities or anything that would make us question the creditworthiness of the applicant. Again, the EDA has recommended that you approve a $21,500 revolving loan to LCDHT LLC at 3.25% interest. The resolution would note a 25-year amortization with a 5-year review. It would require a personal guarantee executed by Montana and her spouse, Samantha Hazeltine, and it would allow for the subordination of the mortgage to those held by First National Bank and the SBA 504 program. Again, I answer any questions that the members or mayor may have.
Questions for Russ? And we do have Montana here if anybody has a question for her. Brad?
I guess I'll just answer. I'll answer a question before it's asked. So I did actually ask the question during the EDA meeting of Montana that if this wasn't approved, what she could just go on renting, and she said it would. The advantage of us actually making this, it would allow Montana to maintain her cash on hand. But Mike Favor explained that because this is currently owned by the St. Peter Development Corp., that $400,000 that from the sale will actually be able to be reinvested in the community. So that's actually where the big gain is, and that's where, from a flexibility standpoint, I'm fine with the flexibility at this point then, because it'll allow another $400,000 basically reinvestment back in the community. So the question was raised as to, in this case, why should we go under the 10%? And that was one of the explanations.
Okay. Just for clarification for everyone, I think everyone probably knows, but for anybody watching, the Development Corp is a separate entity than the EDA, or the Economic Development Authority of the city, which is part of the city. So it's two separate entities. We are the city is not selling this building. It's the Development Corp that is selling the building. Anyone else? Any questions? Carrie?
This is Carrie Johnson. I have a question for Montana. Montana, what prompted you to take this leap? And again, just as we were talking with Chad earlier, we appreciate, the business in St. Peter and having the confidence in St. Peter and being a part of this community. Can you talk about what made you want to purchase the building?
Sure. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for having me here. What made me want to take this leap? I love St. Peter. I love living here. I love working here. I love owning a business here. And the biggest reason for wanting to do this is securing a location for the bakery for a long time. The biggest way that I see I can do that is to actually own the property that the bakery is located, just as far as financially and as far as a long-term lease. If I ultimately hold that power, then I just feel more secure in our future. Plus, like I said at the beginning, I really love it here and I have no plans to go elsewhere. So we would just love to keep sinking our roots in St. Peter, and this seems like a natural way to do that.
Thank you, Montana.
Anyone else? Montana, I too want to thank, this is the mayor, I too want to thank you for your commitment and your confidence. It really does show, and appreciate you being here. I do have a side question. The $10,000 COVID micro loan that you received, has that worked out all right for you? Is it enough? Do you need more?
I'm very appreciative of how quickly the city responded and got that to us. It's been extremely helpful for my business, and I would say right now it feels like the perfect stepping stone, but of course there's so much unknown ahead that time will only tell. But I feel good with where we're at the moment.
All right, thank you. Emily, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, just a comment and basically an echo of what Mr. Mayor and what Carrie said. about, just thank you very much, Montana, for your investment in St. Peter. We all really appreciate that, so thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Russ, I have a question for you. This money now that the Development Corp is going to be receiving, what's their next plan? Are they going to build some houses?
Mr. Mayor, we haven't had a meeting. I'm an ex officio, so I do attend their meetings, although I am not a member of their board, but we haven't had a meeting for quite some time. They had appointed a subcommittee to consider some level of some residential activity. I know that they had reached out and had some very preliminary discussions with some property owners. But I truly, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that they've probably even met since February now. We've canceled the monthly meetings until further notice.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? The resolution approving the $21,500 revolving loan to YCDHT LLC, River Rock Bakery and Kitchen, for the purchase of 217 and 219 West Park Road. Appears on pages 102 and 103. Is there a motion for approval?
Emily will make a motion.
Okay, we got Emily 1 and Shannon 2. Any more questions at this time? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Resolution is approved, and thanks again to you, Montana, and Russ for all of your input here tonight. We had a lot of it. That concludes our new business. Next up, we have reports. The only thing I want to bring up, and I neglected to do this in previous meetings, is I want to thank Nicollet County taxpayers and Nicollet County for making St. Peter safer, especially on Front Street, by adding their parking lot on the east side of Front Street. I travel that multiple times per day, and I don't know if anybody else does, but the cars are now off the street, and you don't have to worry about somebody pulling out of the parking lot on the that you can't see. So I want to just thank them for that. Sometimes we kind of forget there's other government entities that are doing good things too. With that, I'll turn it over to Todd.
Mr. Mayor, as it's been the practice since the declaration of the emergency for COVID-19, I provided a report at all of your meetings. I want to provide a relatively short one. As some of you know, and as you articulated earlier, the governor has had a mask order. And so if people have questions about that and how that might impact them personally or their business, please feel free to give us a call. We're happy to steer them in the right direction and provide the best information we can on that. I also want to mention, as a part of MRVT, that if you are going to be riding on the bus on MRVT, you are now required to have a mask. And so we want to encourage folks, and when people call in for that dial-a-ride, we remind them of that and try and help them along with that as much as we can. Within City Hall, masks are required, certainly at the community center, and staff and participants here in activities should be aware of that, and we believe that we're doing a good job with signage and encouraging people to follow the rules that are set out with that. We are continuing to evaluate and have met with your audit firm today to discuss the potential of the COVID-19 or CARES dollars that we've talked about. So you can expect within a month or so to have a little bit more of a report on that and some potential action relative to use of those funds and funds that would not only benefit the city but benefit others within your community as well. We have some ideas as the new rules and the regulations roll out that we want to work to fruition before we bring that back to you. But we think there's some opportunity there to not only assist the city organization, but your overall community as well. If I could go on to the next one, I do want to mention, Mr. Mayor and members, that I do have a report in your packet from your goal session on June 29th. So please take a look at that packet and that agenda item on page 104 and 105. And if you have questions or concerns about that, this is not meant to be minutes of that meeting, but rather kind of a general discussion of what you discussed so we can use it in the future as you move from meeting to meeting to meeting. I think one of the most significant items in there that you've previously discussed and we've talked about in the hot sheet and other locations is the small modification, but I think important modifications that you made to the items of vital importance. And so those are articulated in there, as is the DOT presentation on the south intersection of Highway 169, 22, and 99, as is some discussion about your sustainability goals and solar projects. And certainly, fund balance and EDA balances were a small discussion. You did a lot of work confirming activity from the EDA tonight, and so it's important that we understand the finances for that. Mr. Mayor, the last one that I have relates to polling place. And really want to do two things. We want to mention that the August primary here is going to be held. If you want to vote in person, you can vote in person at the fairgrounds at Johnson Hall. So be ready for that. Folks that are impacted by this should have received a postcard, but we will have signage up at the Armory and signage at the fairgrounds to make sure that people can get to the right location. But we do want to encourage people, if they have the opportunity to use absentee voting, certainly during this time of COVID, we've seen an uptick in that, and that is still available for folks. And you can go to the courthouse and do that, or you can certainly get your ballot sent to you by filling out a form online. And so if you have questions about that, please let us know. Check out the hot sheet, give us a ring, give the county a ring. We'll be happy to kind of get you in the right direction so you can make that happen.
Todd?
Yes, sir.
Clarification. You know, I heard your first line that you said, if you want to vote, you can go to Johnson Hall. People on the south end
We'll still be at the community center.
still be at the community
Yes.
center, so don't.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Don't try to go there and vote if you're on.
Yeah, so
on
if
the
you
cen-
voted at the community center in the past, you're still there. But if you voted either at Johnson Hall or the Armory for this primary, it is at Johnson Hall, just off Union Street.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anything else, Todd?
No, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
All
I
right.
got, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go ahead, Ed.
Are the rides on the bus still free, and how long, much longer does that last if they are?
Yes, the MRVT board met a couple of weeks ago, and so because of CARE funding, rides will continue to be free through February of next year, through the end of February of 2021. And so that's a wonderful deal. And of course, we are on a dial-a-ride system, so we encourage people to give us a call, or you can reserve in advance. And so our rides continue to tick up. That's probably more driven by the ability for businesses to be open to provide services than it is the price of transit, but certainly it being free is not a bad deal.
No.
All right.
May I also ask a question about the report?
Yep. Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, Todd, you had mentioned, you were talking about the signage and the mask mandate. I had brought this up last week a little bit about, spreading the word and having that done in multiple languages. The state does have a translation portal with that information translated, so I'm just wondering, I know all the signs are up, but just a suggestion to include some of those translations that make sense for our community.
That's fantastic. One of the resources that we have used and have used regularly in these kind of instances, specifically for our new immigrant and Somali community, is certainly we talk with Afi and Mohammed at the mosque, and they use an app called WhatsApp that we've found spreads the word fantastically on these kind of issues. So that's one of the resources that we use as well. But I'll make sure that gets done in the upcoming hot sheet.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or anything they would like to add? Steve, I'm surprised. Go ahead.
I have a question. Mr. Mayor, you never cease to amaze me. I have two questions. No, one. I got two. Barb, do we have enough people that are judges for both the primary and the general election?
We do have enough individuals who will work on the primary. We will recruit additional people, probably the end of August, beginning of September.
Okay, I guess I better not ask the second question.
No, you go ahead, Steve. No, go ahead.
I was going to ask our administrator if anyone ever told him if he looks like the Lone Ranger.
Well, maybe you shouldn't have asked that, Steve.
I have not, Mr. Mayor, members, no one has said that to me.
All right. Anyone else? Have any questions? Anything else they'd like to share? All right. The primary is 2 weeks from tomorrow,
Yeah.
August 11th. So if no one else has anything else to share, is there a motion to adjourn?
Ed will make a motion to adjourn.
Carrie Johnson will second.
Ed 1, Carrie 2, all in favor of adjournment,